Lord be with you. So a few of you have said that you find it hard to hear me during the Sunday school hours, so we'll have to try to figure this out as time goes on. But it's okay, it's a good problem to have, so we'll figure it out. All right, so in case you've missed the announcements for some reason, don't forget 2 o'clock today, bid for help here in Fellowship Hall. Some of you are new enough that I want to make sure you understand the bid for help. Beverly, what did we decide? It started 20 plus years ago. Maybe longer than that, to where we desire to, internally to the church, to kind of handmade things, big things, pass along new things, maybe very gently use things. And that those funds raised would go to helping those who have some financial crisis or needs. It is very confidential who connects with the church. Rusty and a team of volunteers kind of vet those situations. We help those inside the church. There are people who have been inside the church that needed help that went and received some of those funds. And you won't hear about that because it's all confidential. So I am very pleased and happy of the way it works from the accountability process. But that team that Rusty put together has the financial fiduciary responsibility to make sure that those funds are being used appropriately. And it's a great thing. So in case you were wondering what the bid for help was, that's kind of it. And it's a fun time as well. So I hope to see you there. Now, some of you still owe me, if you would, for a lot of things. I'll give you a bill later. Areas of service and opportunities. If you have some areas that as a result of taking the financial or the spiritual gifts assessment, if you kind of found that and you said, you know what, I think there might be some areas, we have those sheets up here. If you haven't already filled one out, please do. Just saying, I have interest in this or that area. Also, if you would, give me back, if you haven't already, your salmon with your top 3 gifts. Now, remember, what we're going to eventually do with this is put all these into kind of buckets, and that way it gives us the ability to understand, look, God has put some people into our church with these spiritual gifts. How do we best allow them an opportunity to develop those and practice those spiritual gifts? And we'll also match it up in some cases with the white sheets on areas of ministry opportunity you may be interested in, and plug you in with the right person so that it gives you a chance to say yes or no. But it also gives you a chance to say yes, and that's what we think is important. All right, today, the people refuse to believe from Matthew chapter 13. So turn to Matthew chapter 13. Let me give you the setting. Jesus is coming home. Remember, he was about 30 years old when he went into public ministry. He grew up in Nazareth. He grew up there until, well, he came back from Egypt. Remember the story, Herod was still after him, so they fled. They fled from Bethlehem because Herod was going to kill them. They went to Egypt for a period of time until Herod died. The original Herod, the great, died. And then they came back. They were a little concerned about going to where they were from, so they ended up in Nazareth. So as they ended up there, they lived there. And so Joseph was a carpenter. He taught his children how to be carpenters. That's the way it usually went. So Jesus obviously was a carpenter in that town. Statistically, the odds are you may think of Nazareth being a small town. Some historians say during Jesus' day it was over 10,000 people. So they had multiple synagogues. They didn't have just one. Now, I don't know how to prove how many people were there, but we know it isn't a little tiny village at this point, right? So I want you to appreciate that Jesus grew up there. He had a business there until he was 30, and then he left. He began to assemble his disciples. At this point, Matthew has recorded numerous miracles that he's done. I mean, He has brought people back to life from the dead. He has fed 5,000 men, not including women and children. All these things, all these stories are going back to his hometown, right? There are probably people from his hometown who have gone and witnessed some of these things. And now he comes home. And as the custom in all the churches back in those days, the synagogues, when Jesus came home, they would give him a chance to probably preach or teach the lesson for the day. And so Jesus does that. Okay, and I just want you to get this picture. He has done all these miracles. People are hearing about what great wisdom he has, what a great teacher he is, and he's come home. Okay, Stacey, you ready? Go.
When Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers, they asked. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things? And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home." And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith.
Thank you. So a number of you in here went away to the army. A number of you left home and went to college, right? You came home and you probably felt after you come home from those experiences, you've grown, you've matured, you've learned some things, you have new skills, maybe some new wisdom. And you come home and everybody remembers you as being the person who in the second grade cried because you didn't get a piece of cake. And they remember all that stuff, right? So this is kind of Jesus. But look at your outline because I want to drive you through some points here quickly. Why did Jesus return home? Why did Jesus return home?
His mom was cooking supper.
Usually there is an element of truth in any question that gets answered, right? And so I want you to think from Steve Campbell's perspective, what brings him to your house. Okay? If you do not promise him food, he won't come. So there you are. If you promise Steve food, he's going to show up. All right? Why else did Jesus return home besides his mom was cooking supper? To see his family, probably a good answer. By the way, we don't know.
It was his time.
It was his time. Okay, that's fair. Which is a fairly common way for us to say, I'm not sure, so let's just say it was his time. Yeah. I think you should appreciate that Jesus' ministry, if you follow it on a map, there really is a plan. Okay, he was very deliberate about the things that he did. So Jesus obviously was deliberate in going home. Do we know ultimately the one reason or the 5 reasons? We don't. We can kind of guess. We can kind of intelligently decipher it. But he did return home. And I want you still to see the picture. 30 years old, ran a business till he was 30, left, and he's come home. Not sure how long he's been gone. It's probably safe to assume at least a year. Okay, so, but during that time now, throughout the entire land, no one has not heard of Jesus. Okay, no one has not heard of the miracles. No one has not heard about this guy's teaching and his awesome wisdom that he exhibits, right? So everybody back at home's heard all these things, whether they witnessed it or not. And he comes back to teach. Okay? Now, just put some historical perspective in this. We when we translate words, we translate to words that we use and recognize, right? There was no Jesus in Hebrew or Aramaic, right? That's a translation from the Hebrew word, Hebrew name, to Greek. So Jesus is a Greek name. right? Like Jesus, the Christ. Christ is Greek for Messiah. Okay, so appreciate that his name would be Yeshua. Yeshua. So if you were Jewish, there were all kinds of Yeshuas in the village, right? Yeshua is even an older name. You would translate it to Joshua. So if you see Josh Bennett, just call him Jesus. That's how it's translated in Greek. And then we know there's Jesus Bennett back there. Okay? Now, I want you to appreciate that he had a name like a lot of men in the village, because Joshua was one of the great heroes of the Old Testament, right? So you think, I get it, that his name would kind of stand out, right? Jesus, that's Jesus. Who else is named Jesus? Well, everybody was named Yeshua, right? So he would have just been another Joshua who was in the village, who happened to be a carpenter. He was a carpenter's son, right? Now, why did his family, friends, and neighbors respond the way they did?
Cleaned his diaper at one time.
What's that?
I changed his diaper one time.
Yeah, I changed his diaper one time. They didn't believe who he was. Okay, that's fair.
Familiarity brings contempt.
Familiarity brings contempt. Yep. Like when you might have gone to, like when you may have gone to, again, college and you came home. You know, Kenny, your daughter's a doctor, right? You don't see her as a doctor, do you? You still remember her in the first grade, right? Okay, you remember her kindergarten pictures. So yeah, it's kind of hard to, I'm sure when she comes home, she's thinking, yeah, they don't recognize who I am. Yeah. I want you to also see this though. His family, friends, and neighbors have a perceived way that he should be and who he should be. You and I do the same with one another. We have a perception, we have our mind made up of the way somebody is or should be, and we pigeonhole them into that. And you and I do that to one another. Okay? You and I do that to one another. Not just you do it to me, but I do it to you too. Yeah.
Sometimes he comes home to say goodbye.
Say it again.
Sometimes he would come home to say goodbye.
Come home to say goodbye. Okay. Why were they offended?
He's smarter than them. He knew more than them.
Okay, so smarter than them, more than them.
It wasn't the smartness, it was the interpretation that was different.
Okay, so they were,
Different perspective of what they expected.
he was supposed to be this person, and he wasn't. He was over here, right? Completely different. All right. So remember, we become offended when people aren't the way we think they should be. Now reverse that. People will be offended at you as you practice and walk your faith. Because they're going to remember the fact that you said something one time that wasn't very nice. That you told them a dirty joke one time that you were nasty to someone else. They'll remember when you had a bad day, right? They're offended that you would be acting different from what they expect you to do. So appreciate that all of us can practice what Jesus' hometown people did. We can be offended when somebody is not acting the way we expect them to, right? And again, that will happen to you as you practice your faith. It will be that way. So it will happen. Now look at verse 57 real quick. And they took offense at him, but Jesus said to them, the prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home. How does this happen with Jesus in your life? You don't have to answer publicly, but I want you to dwell on that. How does it happen in your life that people don't know who you really are now that you become? So you're not being honored sometimes for your faith. Instead, you're being criticized for your faith. You're being judged for your faith. Verse 58. Here's where we want to dwell for a while. And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. Interesting that Matthew would write that, isn't it? Because he's reading about the hassles they're giving Jesus, okay? And they did it in a really couched way. I'm guilty of this often. Don't look at my wife, she can tell you. But you know, we ask the questions, where did this man get all this wisdom, these miraculous powers? Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers with us? Okay, we couch a statement inside of a question. So when we go to the miracles, Matthew particularly draws this out, and he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. Remember the rumors and the stories, and even some eyewitnesses who came back to Nazareth said, you wouldn't believe what he did. I mean, I saw him heal a man that was a leper. I saw him do this. So they're telling firsthand accounts. So appreciate this. In those days, many people were not illiterate. They just weren't real well read and well educated. Okay. They had public education, but it was pretty limited, particularly for women. So appreciate that they may not be illiterate, but they're not educated. So everybody communicated what's called oral tradition. Okay, they didn't have, the internet was really slow. It was like Dick's Hollow Road was slow, okay, back then. So it was really slow, and they didn't have really printed word to speak of, except when they opened up the scrolls at synagogue. And so it's oral tradition. People talk. And the way that you validate it is if you had more than one eyewitness, it was considered legally admissible as truth. Okay, that's the way they did it. If you had two or more witnesses to an event, that was true. And so people were hearing from multiple people. Well, I heard this, but I saw this. I heard this, I saw this. So they've been hearing all these stories. Okay? So all these miracles that he's been doing, and then he comes to his own hometown and does almost none. So look at your outline. I asked the question, are we participants in miracles? Kim Black, you were gone last Sunday, so you didn't have a chance to show off. I'm going to give you a chance. So are we participants in miracles? Your choices, by the way, are yes or no.
Yeah. I'm sure that's wrong.
Wow, that's no confidence at all.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
The answer is yes? Okay. What if I told you the answer is no?
I didn't say that. So I was
Actually,
right.
actually, it's
It's
both.
both.
It's both. No.
Knowingly and unknowingly.
Oh, yeah, hold on. Are we participants in miracles? The answer is yes. The answer is no. Now look at the next one. What does faith have to do with miracles? So what does faith have to do with miracles? Julia?
I feel like if you don't have faith, you won't believe if a miracle does happen.
You won't recognize it as
Yeah,
a
you
miracle.
won't recognize it, right?
Okay.
It's a coincidence, it's this, it's a that.
Okay, so you misidentify. Okay, that's fair.
Faith gives you the yes to the question above.
Faith gives you yes to the question above. Okay, so faith helps you to answer the question yes.
What's your definition of a miracle?
Kim, it's your chance. This is your chance. Because the last one, you really won. It's your chance. Hey, you went to school with him. So come on, impress him.
What was it again? I was listening.
Hey, Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy, how about you?
I already know once. I think it's the screen up there a while ago. I didn't hear what he said.
What's the
What is your
definition?
definition of a miracle?
I would say, I'm sure this is what you said. Well, I mean, you may recognize it as unexplained, but it is explained to, maybe to the person who has the faith, maybe to the person who he said doesn't recognize it, might just think it's a coincidence.
Is that a reasonable one, Kenny? Are you gonna give her a good score? for
Just
that?
tell me you didn't hear what I said.
I didn't really hear what you said.
No different consistencies. Say it loudly, Kim.
I would say unexplained may mean, it may mean different things to different people. Unexplained to you, maybe, yeah, I clearly recognize what that was. Unexplained to you, lack of faith, I don't know who said that, would be just coincidence. What do you think?
You like that?
Yeah, I just really question,
Doug, I have
does
an
faith
example.
really have anything to do with miracles?
Yeah.
Because, let's just look at life. There are miracles that happen to people that have zero faith or profess nothing to do with Christianity or whatever. And then there are plenty of people who have tons of faith and can't get a miracle to happen. So I really am struggling with the faith miracle concept that we have here. That makes sense.
So,
Because,
thank you
because
for your
we-
honesty.
I think we've always, I think I've even heard it out of your mouth, this church doesn't believe something happens bad to you because you sin, okay? So, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm just struggling with that a little bit here.
Thank you for your honesty. That's good. Because I do too. Kim?
Wow.
Well, my Bible says that, Matthew's emphasis is on the role of faith in the healings rather than on the manner in which they were accomplished. And over here it says that Matthew characteristically maintains more of a distinction between teaching and miracles, speaking of them individually. This wisdom and these miraculous powers being attracted to these miraculous works is not sufficient to make one a true disciple of his. Faith for Matthew is crucial, and the limited miracles performed in Nazareth are directly attributed to the people's lack of faith.
Okay? Julia?
He comes back. I just wanna, I'm having struggles now, but I just wanna say that my whole life, I feel like is based upon miracles because they're unexplained things that I have no reason, for them to have happened. From the very beginning of getting adopted by strangers. And then most recent, 2019, having complete liver failure and being put on the transplant list so that I could get a new liver. And then boom, I'm basically healed. And not 100%, but basically, my liver is functioning just as good as anybody else's.
I wrote something up here for you to just look at for a moment. Remember that many times when we witness things, we have a tendency to want to explain it, right? And so sometimes, yeah, we want to explain it to you. So here's what happens a lot of times. We look at something and it happens and we explain it away. We say, well, sometimes that happens in medicine. Well, maybe they didn't diagnose it properly. Maybe the person really didn't understand. So we have a tendency to believe a lot of times a little more in magic than we do miracles. We have a tendency to say, miracles. That's just a sleight of hand, or we didn't understand what caused it, or maybe we didn't hear it right, or that happens sometimes. And so it's okay if you get a little confused by this, but remember, most of us, we want magic out of God. We want God to magically make things go away. I'm a believer, so why am I struggling with this? I read about this person, that this happened in their life. Why can't God do that for me? And so a lot of times we have this belief that God is this great magician who's going to suddenly miraculously make this disappear. So think of this. What does faith have to do with miracles, Kenny? Well, because Matthew is making us look at it this way. And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. So faith has something to do with miracles. What's the formula? What's the formula? Don't ask me. I don't know. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I looked up the definition of miracle.
Okay.
Because I'm like, okay, what is a miracle? Something that happens to people that are of faith. And so this is what the definition says. A surprising and welcome event that is non-explicable by nature or scientific laws and is therefore considered to be the work of a divine agency.
Okay.
So that's coming from the teacher side of me. Because I don't think of miracle. I mean, yes, you have a miracle that happens, but you, in my opinion, you have the faith behind it. But can I use the word miracle someplace else? And it's not faith behind it. So by the definition, faith is behind it.
So think of source. When you begin to think of miracles, we think of source, right? But if I don't understand the miracle, how do I know the source? Okay?
Would you say that faith is a catalyst of miracles and vice versa? Miracles is a catalyst for faith?
Can you say it louder?
No.
Somebody make a note. I agree with Ken. Just first time. It's time.
That's a miracle.
That's a miracle. So I want you to hear this from me, and I think this is very scripturally evident. If you're diagnosed tomorrow with a terminal illness, and you pray about it, and our whole church prays with you, and we're all sincere, we pray for you, and you die 6 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days from now, does that mean that God is not good? Does it mean that miracles still don't happen? It's just that that didn't happen in your case. Okay? Yeah, so Jesus prayed, thy will be done, right? So I want you to think that source.
Easy to say.
It is easy to say, absolutely. It's hard to process, particularly when it's you, or a loved one. So think of source. A lot of times, if we kind of have a picture of where the source came from, it adds to our faith. So the people in Jesus's village, they knew him. They had painted him as just being a carpenter. He's the boy who is Mary's son. Joseph's dad died a long time ago, and he's disappeared for a while now. All these grandiose stories that nobody really can believe. After all, that doesn't happen, right? And he comes home, and so they're struggling to believe in Jesus, right? Now, that being the case, there's this thing in miracles called value and benefit. Now, you and I aren't the arbiters of that. We're not the judge of that. God is. So we think in terms of Kenny's statement earlier that I agreed with, Kenny Younger's statement dealing with this, which I don't know if I agree with Kenny. That's okay. It's something about the name Ken. It's in the way I put it. So he mentioned, there are people who have no faith, miracles happen, people that do, no miracle happens. I want you to think that God in his infinite wisdom and his infinite goodness uses people. He uses events. Miracles happened to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Pharaoh hated God. And yet he used Pharaoh to perform many miracles in the release of people. He used an ungodly man who had no belief, and he had miracles performed in his presence and in his life. Many of them were plagues against him, but nonetheless, they were there. So you can say, well, wait a minute, God used miracles in Pharaoh's life to make his point. And Pharaoh wasn't a believer. So miracles can happen with no faith. Okay? Likewise, let's go to the other side. People who have great faith, no miracles happen in their life that are identifiable. But I want you to think of value and benefit because God has a plan. I don't understand it. I won't begin to understand it on this side of heaven. But his value and benefit is all that matters. So obviously, for some reason, Jesus didn't want to do many miracles in his hometown because you know what? They're not going to believe it anyway. If you think about it, it becomes a magic show. That's why the Pharisees often ask Jesus, show us a sign, right? So if Jesus would have said, oh, here's a sign, and he'd have gone,
Just the sign.
you die? Oh, they're dead officially? Okay, back to life. And then they would have said, well, show us another one, right? So it's like a magic show where you keep showing miracles and miracles, miracles that still don't believe, show us another miracle, show us another miracle. You see, the value and benefit is miracles point to God. Miracles point to God's goodness, to his plan, his benevolence, to his power, right? They don't point to the fact that I'm a great prayer or that I'm a person of great faith or medium faith or no faith. So Jesus decided not to do miracles because there was no value and benefit to the kingdom of God. Because it had just been a magic act to those people. They didn't believe in the stories they had heard. They didn't believe in the witness that was given to them, was legally admissible in court. All these great things that he's been doing and saying and the parables and all that, they didn't believe it. And he, the carpenter's son, you know, he fixed the door of my barn before he left.
And it wasn't square.
Yeah, and it wasn't square when he got done. Okay. Yeah, that's right. So they weren't willing to believe no matter what he did.
Is there any chance it's a little jealousy?
Any chance, a little jealousy? Kenny,
Because let's face it.
I think it's a good point.
The human nature, someone goes off and makes it big, didn't come for much, they come back. On the surface, everybody says, well, great job, well done. But inside, deep down, there's gotta be some jealousy.
That's fair.
But there's a differential there between being an athlete
I'm not just talking
and
about
somebody
athletes, I'm
with
talking about
brains.
Any,
Right.
Yeah,
anyone.
Yeah, but regardless, the outcome's about the same.
No, I don't think so. I think an athlete is always a great person.
Yeah.
Until his knees go and then, well,
Yeah.
sorry about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Who does he think he is?
Yeah, who does he think he is? Yeah, that's a good point.
And
Now-
it made me think that I know Jesus didn't think he was better than them, but maybe that's like, well, who do you think he is? So, you know.
Yeah, so let me testify to you that I have witnessed some miracles. I have witnessed some miracles. And there, it's an awesome experience to witness some of those. They were for the benefit of him. It just so happens in some cases they benefited other people. I have witnessed medical miracles in ministry people. And it hasn't changed them. They didn't grow in their faith. God, for whatever reason, provided a miracle, unexplained. Didn't change it. So at some point, I guess they, at their time, they'll face God and he'll say, wait a minute, I did this in your life. Why did you change it? Right? So don't think in terms of that a miracle didn't happen in my life, I'm not worthy. Don't think that way. God has he has a value and he has a benefit, right? I don't know how else to describe this. He has a plan, if you will. And if you happen to be one of those people that are part of that and a miracle happens in your life, then it's a testimony that God is good, right?
I think that childbirth to me is one of the greatest miracles.
Yeah, so in the sermon, we talk about Romans chapter 1, and where Paul says that it is evident to all men the nature of God, right? When you look around you, you cannot miss that these things are greater than what we are, and that we should be able to explain them away other than their miracles. Now, quickly, why does someone refuse to believe in Jesus? There are many, many reasons. There's three I want you to think about today: control, freedom, and free will. Often in sharing the gospel with people, these three seem to come to the top They're not articulated that way, but they could be defined that way. So here's what I mean. A lot of people struggle with putting all of their faith in God. There's a lot of people who know, all right, I'm going to put my foot in this camp because I know that I want to get to heaven, so I'm going to believe, but I'm not going to give all my life to God because I don't want to lose control. So it'll be articulated like this. Maybe if it's you, maybe you articulate it like this. Well, things are good financially, so I don't really need to, really practice my faith there because everything's okay. Right? Or, well, I've been very blessed and fortunate in this part of my life, so I really don't have to worry about that. Instead, I focus on this. So what you're saying to me when you say that is, whatever you said doesn't matter, but here's how I read it. I think here's how it's evident. I don't want to let this control go. Because if I let this control go, God will change it. He'll mess it up. And so we're worried about God messing it up. We don't want to get in control. Freedom. There are people who, I've had lots of friends over the years that enjoy partying, okay? And they'll say, well, I'm a believer, but, I enjoy my parties. Okay. Well, good for you. So they're worried that they won't be able to drink more than 2 beers on the weekend if they become a Christian. Should you drink 1 beer, 20 beers over the weekend? Let God work that out with you. But what you have to get is this, that the freedom that we're worried about, the way we articulate that is, the freedom that we're worried about giving up means I don't want God in my life here. You want to be a God of your own life. I don't trust God to do what's best for you. Same could be with your money. The same could be with relationships. It could be with the sites you go to on websites. It could be who you hang around with. You don't trust God to have your very best intentions, so you're not going to let him get in the way of your freedom. Okay? Now, if God is really good, then would he stand in the way of you having a good time? No. Now, it may look different than the way you define it, but you'll still have a good time. So, control and freedom. Third one, free will. God gave us that blessing, that curse of free will. We can choose to believe in him and choose not to believe in him. And free will is a blessing and a curse. Because free will means I have to decide regularly. Often my prayers the first thing in the morning before I get out of bed is, God, help me to be your servant today. Help me to follow you today. It's a choice I have to make. Because I can get up in the morning and I can decide I'm not going to follow. I'm not going to trust him. I'm going to take control back. God doesn't know what's best. God doesn't have best in mind for me. I can think that way, and that's free will. So you have to watch those 3 things. The concept of Christian versus disciple, we got to move quickly. I'm encouraging you to go beyond the title of Christian and to go into the mode of thinking of being a disciple. A disciple means that you become a true follower in all aspects and relevant areas of your life, right? Christian means, okay, I made a decision, it's a title. I'm an American, right? It doesn't mean that I'm willing to lay down my life for being an American. And so I'm a Christian, okay, and I'm willing to lay my life down. That's a disciple. So move from the title of Christian to the journey of being a disciple. It is a difference, and we'll talk more about that in the future. Ourselves versus Christ, a lot of times when people refuse to believe because I know what's best, and I really don't want Jesus to take over this part of my life. If he does, it might mess up. So Jesus' hometown normal versus Jesus' hope. Here's where I want you to focus on this. We have you have your own traditions. You have your own traditions, right? This is the way you do things. This is the way you celebrate. This is the way you party. This is the way you interact with people. This is the way that you When you get your feathers ruffled, this is the way you behave. And so we have our traditions, we have what we call our normals, right? Yeah, defined by who, right?
Yes.
So we have our traditions and we have our normal. Now, I want you to recognize this. What about versus God's plan? So when we get to this aspect of our faith walk today, this is the challenge I leave you with is Jesus was hometown normal boy, but Jesus was more than that. And the people at home weren't willing to let him be that. Don't hold each other back. Don't let me hold you back. I'm not going to let you hold me back. So you have your traditions and what's normal versus God's plan. Follow God's plan. By releasing control of this, you'll find that God has great plans for you where you are. So the last question we leave with at the bottom in italics letters is what will you believe and how will that change you? So if God isn't changing you in your life, then I would suggest you haven't given control to God in your life.
A lot of people, I have had people come to me when we're talking about God and Jesus. Well, I don't believe in something I can't see.
Yeah, so I don't believe in something I can't see. It's pretty hopeless because I really can't believe in the America because I can't see it, right? It's hard to see it now in the day of world. So we can't give up our hope there. We can't give up our hope in Jesus Christ just because we can see it. Let's do the Lord prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you that we have an opportunity to choose to follow you, to choose to move from just being the title of Christian to the title of disciple, a journey, a pathway. Help us to give control to you, turn over our free will to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Don't forget 2 o'clock today. Thank you very much.
Jesus is coming now. Did they not lose him at age 12?